The laughter from our living room had that sharp edge that comes after too many drinks and too little sense. I stood in the kitchen, watching my wife Nira hold court with her advertising agency friends, the ice in my whiskey melting as slowly as my patience. "Come on! Everyone in a circle!" Maya, Nira's best friend and chief instigator, clapped her hands like we were all still in college. "Truth or dare time!" I should have walked away then. Should have grabbed my jacket and headed to the garage workshop, where I could tinker with security systems and pretend the party wasn't happening. But something kept me rooted to that doorway, watching as 15 adults arrange themselves on our expensive furniture like teenagers at a sleepover. Nira caught my eye and gestured for me to join them. Her cheeks were flushed from wine, her designer dress riding up as she settled onto the couch between Maya and Aidan Fox, her smooth-talking colleague who drove a vintage Jaguar and wore suits that cost more than most people's rent. "Colby, get over here," she called out, patting the armrest beside her. "Don't be such a hermit." I walked over, perching on the edge of the circle, nursing my drink, and wondering how a quiet Saturday evening had devolved into this nonsense. Our lakeside home in Millbrook, Maine, was supposed to be our sanctuary, not a playground for Nira's corporate cronies to act out their midlife crises. The game started innocently enough. Someone confessed to stealing office supplies. Another admitted to lying about their college GPA on their resume. Standard corporate gossip fodder that would fuel Monday morning conversations for weeks. Then Maya spun the bottle, and it landed on Nira. "Truth or dare, gorgeous?" Maya's grin was predatory. "Dare," Nira said without hesitation, tossing her auburn hair over her shoulder. "I'm feeling adventurous tonight." The room went quiet except for the soft jazz playing from our sound system. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the same sensation I'd learned to recognize during my military engineering days when something was about to go very wrong. Maya leaned forward, her voice carrying just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I dare you to choose someone in this room who isn't your husband and tell them exactly what you'd do if you were single for one night." The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. I watched Nira's face, waiting for her to laugh it off, to deflect with one of her clever remarks, to remind Maya that some boundaries shouldn't be crossed. Instead, she turned toward Aidan. "Well," she said, her voice steady and clear. "That's easy enough." The room held its breath. I felt like I was watching the scene through bulletproof glass, detached and clinical, the way I used to analyze security vulnerabilities. Every detail became sharp and precise. The way Aidan's eyes lit up, the collective intake of breath from the other guests, the satisfied smirk on Maya's face. "Aidan," Nira continued, her hand reaching out to touch his knee, "if I were single tonight, I'd take you upstairs and show you why my husband never complains about our bedroom." The laughter that erupted was nervous, excited, scandalized. Someone whistled. Someone else made a crude comment about lucky guys, but I wasn't listening to any of it. I was watching my wife's face, seeing something there I'd never noticed before, or maybe had refused to notice. This wasn't just a game to her. I stood up slowly, setting my glass on the coffee table with deliberate care. The room gradually quieted as people noticed my movement. "Colby." Nira's voice carried a note of uncertainty now, as if she was just realizing what she'd done. I looked down at her, then at Aidan, who was trying to play it cool but couldn't quite hide the smugness in his expression. The rest of the circle watched us like spectators at a car wreck, waiting to see how this would unfold. "Come find me when the game's finally over," I said, my voice calm and even. Then I turned and walked toward the front door, leaving my jacket hanging on the back of my chair. "Colby, wait!" Nira called after me, but I didn't stop. "It was just a game. Don't be so sensitive." I stepped out into the cool Maine evening, the October air sharp against my skin. Our neighbor's luxury penthouse was just 100 yards away, connected to our development by a well-lit walking path. Lila Henderson lived there alone, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who served on our building's board and had always struck me as someone who didn't suffer fools gladly. I knocked once on her door. She opened it wearing a silk robe and reading glasses, a glass of wine in her hand. "Colby, everything all right?" "I was wondering if I could use your guest bedroom for a few minutes," I said. "There's a situation at my place that I need to let play out." Lila glanced past me toward our house, where the party sounds were still audible. Her expression shifted to understanding. "Of course. Come in." Her penthouse was all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of sophisticated minimalism that Nira always claimed to want but could never commit to. Lila led me to the guest room, which had a perfect view of our living room through the large windows. "Take all the time you need," she said. "I'll be in my study if you need anything." I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone, opening our group chat where Maya had been posting party photos all evening. I typed a simple message. "Guest bedroom, Lila's place, location sharing enabled." Then I hit send. Through the window, I could see into our living room where the party was still going strong. Nira was animated, gesturing wildly as she talked to Aidan, who had moved closer to her on the couch. Maya was showing people something on her phone, probably my message. I turned on the bedside lamp and made sure I was visible from the window, then placed my smartwatch on the nightstand where its activity status would show I was stationary. Everything about this needed to be deliberate, documented, undeniable. The wait didn't take long. Within 10 minutes, I heard the front door open and Nira's voice in the hallway, sharp with anger and whine. "Where is he? Lila, I know he's here." "He's in the guest room," Lila replied calmly. "But I think you should consider whether barging in there is really the best approach right now." "He's my husband. This is ridiculous." Footsteps in the hallway, then the bedroom door flew open. Nira stood there in her designer dress, her face flushed with indignation and alcohol. Behind her, looking considerably less confident, was Aidan. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she demanded. "Walking out in the middle of a party like some kind of child? It was just a game, Colby." I looked at her steadily, then at Aidan, who was trying to fade into the background. "Just a game," I repeated. "Interesting perspective." "Don't be dramatic," Nira said, stepping into the room. "Everyone knows truth or dare doesn't mean anything. It's just fun." "Fun." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, where our group chat was exploding with messages. Let's see what everyone else thought was fun. The messages were a mix of shock, excitement, and barely concealed gossip. Maya had written, "Wholly awkward," followed by several fire emojis. Someone else had commented, "Nira going for the gold tonight." Another message read, "Poor Colby, that was brutal." Nira's face went pale as she read, "Those people don't matter. They're just stirring up drama." "Those people are your friends," I said. "Your colleagues. The same ones who will be talking about this at work on Monday, wondering if tonight was the first time you've thought about what you'd do with Aidan if you were single." Aidan finally spoke up, his voice carrying that smooth confidence that had made him successful in advertising. "Look, Colby, nobody meant anything by it. These games get out of hand sometimes. We've all been drinking and—" "We?" I stood up, facing him directly. "There's no we here, Aidan. You didn't get picked randomly. She chose you specifically, in front of everyone, and described exactly what she wanted to do with you. That's not alcohol talking. That's truth." "You're being paranoid," Nira said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "I would never—" "Never what?" I asked. "Never think about other men? Never consider what your life would be like without me? Never discuss our private life with someone else?" The silence stretched between us. Through the window, I could see people starting to leave our party, probably sensing that the evening's entertainment had moved elsewhere. "I think," I said finally, "you both should leave. The game's over, Nira. You made your choice very publicly. Now you get to live with the consequences." "Colby, please," she started, but I was already moving toward the door. "Lila," I called out, "could you please lock the door behind them? I think I'll be staying here for a while." I heard Lila's footsteps, then her voice, polite but firm. "I think that's best. Good evening, Nira. Aidan." The front door closed with a definitive click, followed by the sound of the lock engaging. I returned to the guest room window and watched as Nira and Aidan walked back toward our house, their body language tense and urgent. They stopped on our front porch, and I could see them talking intensely, Nira gesturing toward Lila's building while Aidan kept glancing around as if worried about who might be watching. That's when I realized the game hadn't ended at all. It was just beginning, and for the first time in years, I was the one making the rules. I woke up the next morning in Lila's guest room with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The October sun was streaming through the windows, and I could see our house across the way, looking deceptively peaceful in the morning light. No sign of Nira's car in the driveway. Lila knocked softly on the door. "Coffee's ready if you want some. No pressure to talk, but I'm here if you need an ear." I found her in the kitchen, already dressed for the day in crisp jeans and a cashmere sweater. She poured me a mug of coffee without asking how I liked it. Apparently, she'd been paying attention during building board meetings. "Thank you," I said, settling onto one of her bar stools, "for last night and for not asking questions." "I've been married," she said simply. "I know what it looks like when someone realizes their spouse isn't who they thought they were." Through her kitchen window, I watched a familiar figure emerge from our house. Aidan, doing a poor job of looking casual as he walked to his Jaguar parked down the street. He'd stayed the night. "How long have you suspected?" Lila asked, following my gaze. "I didn't," I admitted. Not consciously, but looking back now there were signs. Late nights at the office that didn't match her calendar. New clothes she claimed were gifts from Maya. That laugh she does when she's lying. I heard it a lot lately. My phone buzzed with a text from Nira. "Can we please talk like adults? Come home." I showed Lila the message. She raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice of words. "Like adults" implies you were being childish last night. That's Nira, always positioning herself as the reasonable one. I typed back, "I'll be home this afternoon. We can talk then." But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I thanked Lila and walked back to our house, noting that Aidan's car was gone, but there was a coffee cup on our front porch table that definitely wasn't there yesterday. Inside, the living room showed evidence of the party: empty glasses, scattered cushions, the lingering smell of wine and expensive perfume. Nira was in the shower. I could hear her singing, which she only did when she was nervous or guilty, usually both. I went to my workshop in the garage, where I kept my security consultation equipment. One of the advantages of designing home security systems is that you understand exactly how they can be circumvented, or in this case, how they can provide information their owners might not realize they're recording. Our smart home system logged everything: when doors opened, when lights turned on, when the security cameras activated. Nira thought I only used it for monitoring potential break-ins, but the system was far more comprehensive than that. I pulled up the logs from the past month, looking for patterns. What I found made my coffee taste bitter. 3 weeks ago, front door opened at 2:17 a.m., closed at 6:45 a.m. Nira had claimed she was at Maya's that night for a girls' weekend. 2 weeks ago, garage door opened at 11:30 p.m., closed at 7:15 a.m. She'd said she was working late on the Morrison account. Last week, motion sensors in the guest room triggered at midnight, stayed active until 5 a.m. I'd been in Boston that night for a client meeting. The pattern was clear, methodical, and insulting in its obviousness. She'd been bringing someone here to our home while I was away or asleep. I heard the shower turn off upstairs and quickly saved the data to an encrypted drive. When Nira appeared in the garage 20 minutes later, I was calmly organizing my tool collection. "There you are," she said, wearing her favorite silk robe and that smile she used when she wanted something. "I was worried when you didn't come to bed last night." I wasn't sure I was welcome, I said without looking up from my tools. She moved closer, her perfume mixing with the smell of motor oil and metal. Of course you're welcome. This is your home too. My home too, I repeated. Interesting phrasing. Colby, please. Can we just forget about last night? I had too much to drink, and Maya was being Maya. You know how she gets everyone worked up. I finally looked at her. So this was Maya's fault? The dare was stupid and inappropriate. I should have refused. She reached out to touch my arm. I'm sorry if it hurt your feelings. Hurt my feelings. I set down the wrench I'd been holding. Nira, you told a room full of people exactly what you wanted to do with another man, in explicit detail, while I was sitting right there. It was hypothetical. Was it? I pulled out my phone and showed her the smart home app. Because according to our security system, someone's been spending a lot of nights here when I'm not around. Her face went white. You've been spying on me? I've been monitoring our home security, which is literally my job. The fact that it revealed your extracurricular activities is just an unfortunate coincidence. She stared at the screen, watching the data scroll past. I could see her mind working, calculating how much I knew versus how much she could still deny. Those logs don't prove anything, she said finally. Maybe I came home late from work. Maybe I had trouble sleeping and went to the guest room. You're reading too much into data. Maybe, I agreed, but I doubt the hotel receipts I found in your car will be as ambiguous. That was a bluff. I hadn't searched her car yet, but the way her face crumpled told me everything I needed to know. How long? I asked. She sat down on my workbench, suddenly looking older than her 32 years. It's not what you think. How long, Nira? 6 months, she whispered. But it's not serious. It's just excitement. Something different. It doesn't mean anything. 6 months, half a year of lies, of coming home to me after being with him, of sitting across from me at dinner and planning her next deception. Does he know it doesn't mean anything? I asked. She looked up sharply. What do you mean? Aidan, does he know he's just your excitement? You're something different? Or does he think this is going somewhere? I don't know what he thinks. We don't really talk about the future. But you talk about me. It wasn't a question. She flinched anyway. Sometimes, she admitted. But not the way you're thinking. What way am I thinking? Like we're plotting against you or something. It's not like that. Sometimes we wonder what it would be like if things were different. I nodded slowly. Different how? If we were both single. If we could be together without all this complication. Complication. I repeated the word like it was foreign. That's what I am to you? A complication? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I stood up, suddenly feeling very tired. You've been living a double life for 6 months, bringing your lover into our home, lying to my face every single day, and when you get caught, you call our marriage a complication. Colby, please, we can work through this. Couples therapy, a trial separation, whatever you need. But don't throw away 8 years over a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. This is a choice, a series of choices made deliberately over months. I walked toward the garage door. I'm going out for a while. When I come back, I want you gone. Gone where? I don't care. Maya's place, a hotel, Aidan's apartment, wherever you want to continue your relationship without the complication of a husband. You can't just kick me out. This is my house too. Actually, since my name is the only one on the deed and the mortgage, I can do exactly that. I paused at the door. You might want to start thinking about where you'll be staying long term. Something tells me this is going to take a while to sort out. I left her sitting in the garage and drove to the Rusty Anchor, the kind of dive bar where Millbrook's working-class residents went to escape the pretensions of the lakeside community. My friend Benji Martinez was already there, nursing a beer and watching football on the ancient television above the bar. Benji had been my partner during my brief stint in the military police, before we both got out and went into private security. He was the kind of friend who would help you move a body without asking questions, though hopefully it would never come to that. "You look like hell," he said as I slid onto the adjacent bar stool. "Feel worse." I ordered a whiskey and told him everything. When I finished, Benji was quiet for a long moment. "So what's the plan?" "Plan? Come on, Colby. I've known you for 15 years. You don't just roll over when someone screws you. You're already 3 steps ahead, figuring out how to make them pay." He was right, of course. Even as I'd been talking to Nira, part of my mind had been calculating angles, considering options, planning moves. It's what I did for a living, identify vulnerabilities and exploit them. "I want them to understand what they've done," I said. "Really understand it. Not just the cheating, but the lying, the disrespect, the assumption that I was too stupid or too trusting to figure it out." Public humiliation? Eventually. But first, I want them to know that I know. I want them to spend some time wondering what I'm going to do with that information. Benji grinned. "Psychological warfare. I like it. What do you need from me?" "Information. Aidan Fox works at Pinnacle Advertising with Nira. I want to know everything about him, where he lives, what he drives, who he's connected to, what his weaknesses are." "Consider it done." Benji pulled out his phone. "Anything else?" "Yeah, I want to know who else knows about this affair, because something tells me Nira and Aidan haven't been as discreet as they think they've been." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Hey, is everything okay? Nira seems really upset about last night. Want to talk?" I showed the message to Benji. "Looks like the information gathering is about to get a lot easier." I typed back, "Could use a friendly ear, rusty anchor on Main Street, know it?" Her response was immediate. "On my way." "This should be interesting," Benji said. "Maya's always been a gossip. If there's dirt to be found, she'll have it." "That's what I'm counting on." Maya arrived 20 minutes later, looking uncharacteristically subdued. She ordered a wine and launched into an immediate apology. "I am so sorry about last night," she said. "That dare was completely inappropriate. I was drunk and stupid, and I never should have put Nira in that position." "Put her in that position?" I asked. "Maya, she chose to answer the way she did. Nobody forced her to say those things about Aidan." Maya shifted uncomfortably. "Well, no, but you know how these games get. People say things they don't mean." "Do they?" I leaned forward, because I'm starting to think Nira meant exactly what she said. The look that crossed Maya's face told me everything. She knew. She'd known all along. "Maya," I said gently, "how long have you known about the affair?" She went very still. "What affair?" "The one between my wife and Aidan Fox that's been going on for 6 months." She stared into her wine glass, clearly wrestling with how much to admit. Finally, she looked up. "I suspected something, but I wasn't sure." "What made you suspect?" "Little things. The way they looked at each other at office parties. How Nira always seemed to know what Aidan was doing on weekends. A few times I called her apartment when she said she was homesick, and she didn't answer." "Did you ever ask her about it?" "Once. About a month ago. She got really defensive and said I was being paranoid." "But you weren't." "No," Maya said quietly. "I wasn't, and I should have said something to you, but I didn't want to cause trouble if I was wrong." "You weren't wrong." I finished my whiskey. "Maya, I need you to be completely honest with me. Who else knows?" "At the office? Probably everyone. Nira and Aidan aren't as subtle as they think they are. There's been talk." "What kind of talk?" "That they're always taking lunch breaks at the same time. That they volunteer for out-of-town conferences together. That Aidan's been bragging about his complicated relationship with a married woman." Bragging. Of course he was. Men like Aidan always had to brag about their conquests. "Has anyone confronted them?" "Not directly. But there's definitely been some tension in the office. Aidan's supervisor isn't happy about the potential for drama, especially since Nira's married to someone in the security industry. That was interesting. Aidan's job might be more vulnerable than I'd thought. Maya, I said, I want you to know that I don't blame you for what happened, but I also want you to understand that this isn't going to just blow over. Nira made a choice last night, and she's been making that same choice for months. There are going to be consequences. She nodded, tears starting to form. I know, and I'm sorry. She's my friend, but what she did to you, it's not right. No, I agreed. It's not. After Maya left, Benji and I sat in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. So what's step one? I smiled, feeling something cold and calculating settle into place. Step one is letting them think they got away with it. Let them relax, get comfortable, maybe even get a little sloppy. And then? Then we start applying pressure. Carefully, strategically, until they understand that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed with another text from Nira. Please come home, we need to talk. I typed back, tomorrow, I need time to think. She's going to spend tonight wondering what you're planning, Benji observed. Good, I said. She should be wondering. She should be very, very worried about what comes next. Because what came next was going to be a masterclass in exactly how much damage one underestimated husband could do when he finally decided to stop playing nice. The next morning, I returned home to find Nira in full damage control mode. She'd cleaned the entire house, prepared my favorite breakfast, and was wearing the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The effort would have been touching if it weren't so transparently manipulative. I made coffee the way you like it, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. And those blueberry pancakes from the recipe your mother gave me. I sat down at the kitchen island and accepted the coffee. Thank you. She hovered nearby, clearly expecting more of a reaction. When I remained silent, she sat down across from me. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, she began, about consequences and choices. You're right. I made terrible decisions and I hurt you. I want to make it right. How? I'll end it with Aidan, completely. I'll request a transfer to a different department, or I'll find a new job entirely. Whatever you need. I took a bite of pancake, considering her offer. What about the 6 months of lying? I'll be completely transparent from now on. You can check my phone, my computer, my calendar, whatever makes you feel secure. And the fact that you brought him here, to our home? She flinched. That was inexcusable. I don't have a good explanation for it. Try anyway. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. It felt exciting, dangerous, like I was someone else, someone more interesting than just a suburban wife with a boring life. Boring life, I repeated. Is that how you see what we built together? No, that came out wrong. I meant... She struggled for words. I meant predictable, safe. We've been together since college, Colby. Sometimes I wondered what I'd missed, what other experiences were out there. So you decided to find out. Yes, and I was wrong. It was selfish and stupid, and I'm sorry. I finished my breakfast in silence, watching her fidget with her wedding ring. Finally, I spoke. Nira, do you remember what I do for a living? She looked confused by the question. You design security systems. I identify vulnerabilities, I corrected. I find the weak points in a system and figure out how they can be exploited. It's what I'm good at. Okay. For 6 months, you've been treating our marriage like a system with vulnerabilities. You found the weak points, my travel schedule, my trust, my assumption that you were the person I married, and you exploited them. Her face went pale. I never thought of it that way. Of course you didn't. You were too busy enjoying the excitement. I stood up, carrying my plate to the sink. But here's the thing about vulnerabilities, Nira. Once they're exposed, they can never be truly secure again. What does that mean? It means I don't trust you. I don't trust your apologies, your promises, or your convenient realization that our life together isn't boring after all. I turned to face her. And I certainly don't trust that you won't get bored again in 6 months or a year and decide you need more excitement. Tears started down her cheeks. So what are you saying? That we're finished? I'm saying that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild, especially when the person who broke it doesn't really understand what they've done. I do understand. I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. No, you don't understand. If you did, you wouldn't be trying to fix this with pancakes and promises. You'd understand that this isn't about forgiveness or second chances. It's about the fact that you fundamentally changed who you are in relation to me. My phone buzzed with a text from Benji. Got some interesting info on your friend Aidan. Can you meet? I showed Nira the phone. I'm going out. We'll continue this conversation later. Where are you going? To learn more about the man you've been risking our marriage for. I left her sitting at the kitchen table and drove to Benji's apartment, a converted warehouse space downtown that he'd filled with enough surveillance equipment to make the NSA jealous. Your boy Aidan is quite a piece of work, Benji said, handing me a folder. Aidan Michael Fox, 38 years old, originally from Connecticut, divorced 2 years ago after his ex-wife caught him cheating with a client. Cheating's a pattern for him? Gets better. The divorce was messy because he tried to hide assets. His ex-wife's lawyer found out he'd been siphoning money from their joint accounts to pay for hotel rooms and gifts for his mistresses. Mistresses, plural? At least 3 that the lawyer could prove. Apparently, Aidan likes variety. Benji pointed to a photo in the file. This is his apartment building downtown. Expensive, but he's leveraged to the hilt. The divorce settlement cleaned him out. I studied the financial information Benji had compiled. He's living beyond his means. Way beyond. Credit cards are maxed out, he's behind on his car payments, and he owes his ex-wife another $50,000 in settlement money. So he's desperate. Desperate and arrogant. I talked to a bartender at that upscale place on Commerce Street. Aidan's a regular, always bragging about his conquests. Apparently he's been telling people he's got a sure thing lined up, a married woman with money who's ready to leave her husband. The pieces clicked into place. He thinks Nira's going to divorce me and support him. That'd be my guess, and based on his spending habits, he's counting on it happening soon. I closed the file, my mind already working through the implications. What else do you have? His work situation is interesting. Pinnacle Advertising is a small firm, maybe 30 employees total, very image-conscious, very concerned about maintaining their reputation with conservative clients. Affairs don't play well with conservative clients, especially affairs between colleagues that create hostile work environments. I did some digging. There have been complaints about Aidan's behavior with female co-workers before. What kind of complaints? Inappropriate comments, unwanted advances, general harassment. Nothing that stuck, but HR has a file on him. This was better than I'd hoped. Aidan wasn't just vulnerable personally, he was vulnerable professionally. I need to see his apartment, I said. Why? Because I want to understand exactly what kind of life Nira thinks she's going to have with him. Benji grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. I already scouted the building. Security's a joke. Electronic locks that can be bypassed with a basic RFID cloner, cameras that don't record, and a doorman who spends most of his time playing games on his phone. I don't want to break any laws, Benji. We won't break in, but there's nothing illegal about being in the building's common areas. And if we happen to observe some things from the hallway, well, that's just good reconnaissance. An hour later, we were in Aidan's building, using the classic security consultant trick of looking like we belonged there. I carried a clipboard and wore a polo shirt with a fake company logo, while Benji posed as my assistant. Aidan's apartment was on the 8th floor, and the hallway had large windows that offered a clear view into his living space. What I saw confirmed everything Benji had told me and more. The apartment was expensively furnished, but obviously rented furniture, the kind of generic luxury that screamed financial desperation. Empty wine bottles lined the counter, and there were women's clothes draped over a chair that definitely weren't Nira's style. "Looks like your wife isn't his only sure thing," Benji observed. As we watched, the apartment door opened and Aidan emerged, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He was talking on his phone, and his voice carried clearly in the hallway. "Told you, she's ready to make the move. Her husband's some kind of tech geek, probably won't even fight the divorce. I'll be set up nicely once she gets her settlement." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "Of course, I'm sure. You should have seen her last night. She practically announced it in front of everyone. She's ready to trade up. Trade up, like Nira was upgrading from an old car to a newer model. Yeah, the husband was there. Looked like a kicked puppy when he left. These tech guys are all the same. No backbone." Benji grabbed my arm as I started forward. "Not here," he whispered. "Not yet." Aidan finished his call and headed toward the elevator. We waited until he was gone, then made our way back to the parking garage. "Well," Benji said as we reached his car, "now you know what he really thinks of you." "No backbone," I repeated. "We'll see about that." "So, what's the plan?" I was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, I smiled. "The plan is to give Aidan exactly what he wants." "Which is?" "A chance to prove how much Nira means to him, how far he's willing to go to protect their relationship, how much he's willing to sacrifice for love." "I don't follow." "Aidan thinks this is all going to be easy. He thinks I'm going to roll over and let him take my wife and half my assets without a fight. He thinks he's dealing with some pathetic, cuckolded husband who doesn't have the backbone to defend what's his." "But you're not that guy." "No," I said, feeling that cold calculation settle back into place. "I'm definitely not that guy, and it's time both he and Nira learned that." "What do you need me to do?" "For now, keep monitoring. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, every move he makes, because very soon, Aidan Fox is going to discover that the biggest mistake of his life was underestimating the wrong husband." As we drove back toward town, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For months, I'd been living in a reality that wasn't real, trusting people who didn't deserve it, believing in a marriage that had become a lie. But now, finally, I could see the situation clearly. Nira and Aidan thought they were playing a game where only they knew the rules. They thought they could manipulate me, use me, discard me when it became convenient. They were about to learn that games work both ways, and I'd been playing them a lot longer than they had. 3 days passed before I made my next move. 3 days of watching Nira try to act normal while clearly wondering what I was planning. She'd taken to checking her phone constantly, jumping whenever it rang, and asking casual questions about my work schedule that weren't casual at all. "Are you going to be home tonight?" she asked over breakfast Thursday morning. "Probably. Why?" "Just wondering. I thought maybe we could order dinner from that Italian place you like. Talk some more." "About what?" "About us. About how we move forward." I looked at her over my coffee mug. She was wearing makeup to cover the circles under her eyes, and her hands were shaking slightly. The stress was getting to her. "Have you talked to Aidan since Monday?" I asked. She nearly dropped her coffee. "What?" "No. I told you I was ending it." "But you haven't actually ended it yet." We haven't spoken. I've been giving him space to process." "Space to process," I repeated. "How considerate of you." She flinched, but didn't respond. I finished my breakfast and headed to the garage, where I'd been spending most of my time lately. Partly to avoid her, but mostly to plan. My phone rang as I was reviewing Benji's latest surveillance report. Maya's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," she said when I answered. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I wanted to check on you." "I'm fine, Maya. Thanks for asking." "Are you, though? Because Nira seems really worried. She called me last night asking if I thought you were planning to divorce her. What did you tell her? That I didn't know, but that she should probably be prepared for that possibility. Maya paused. Colby, can I ask you something? Sure. What are you going to do? About Aidan, I mean. It was an interesting question. Maya was fishing, probably on Nira's behalf. Why do you ask? Because everyone at the office is talking about what happened at your party, and Aidan's been acting really strange, paranoid, looking over his shoulder, asking people weird questions about you. What kind of questions? About your background, your work, whether you have connections to law enforcement. He seems to think you're investigating him. I smiled. Aidan was smarter than I'd given him credit for. Too bad it wouldn't help him. Maya, can I trust you with something? Of course. I'm not investigating Aidan. I don't need to. He's doing a perfectly good job of destroying himself without any help from me. What do you mean? I mean that men like Aidan always overplay their hand. They get cocky, make mistakes, assume they're smarter than everyone else. Eventually that catches up with them. So you're just going to wait? I'm going to let nature take its course. After I hung up, I called Benji. Time for phase 2. What do you need? I need you to make contact with Aidan. Nothing dramatic, just enough to let him know he's being watched. How subtle are we talking? Very. I want him nervous, not panicked. Not yet. That afternoon, Benji followed Aidan to his usual lunch spot, a trendy bistro downtown where Pinnacle advertising employees often met clients. Benji simply sat at a nearby table, ordered lunch, and made sure Aidan noticed him. When Aidan left, Benji left a few minutes later, staying visible but not obviously following. The effect was immediate. Within an hour, I received a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. A. I showed the message to Benji when he arrived at my house that evening. He's rattled. Good. What did you tell him? Nothing. I didn't even approach him. Just made sure he saw me, made sure he knew I was there deliberately. And? He spent the rest of his lunch looking around like he expected SWAT teams to rappel through the windows. Then he made 3 phone calls, probably trying to figure out who I am and why I was there. Perfect. I typed back to Aidan. Do I? You seem to have everything figured out. His response was almost instant. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this needs to stop. What game? I replied. I'm just living my life. Same as you. My phone rang immediately. Aidan's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Listen to me very carefully, he said. I don't know what Nira told you, but whatever you think is happening between us is over. Done. So call off your watchdog and leave me alone. I'm sorry, I think you have me confused with someone else. I don't have any watchdogs. The guy at the restaurant. Don't play dumb. I honestly don't know what you're talking about, but I'm curious. Why would you think I'd have you followed? Have you done something I should be concerned about? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Stay away from me, he said finally. And tell Nira to stop calling. It's over. I'll be sure to pass that along, I said, but he'd already disconnected. Interesting. Apparently, Nira had been calling him despite her claims to the contrary, and now he was trying to cut ties, probably thinking that would protect him from whatever he imagined I was planning. Nira came home an hour later, looking frazzled. She went straight to the kitchen and poured herself a large glass of wine. Rough day? I asked. You could say that. She took a long drink. Aidan called me at work. He said you've been having him followed. Have I? Have you? Nira, I've been working from home for the past 3 days. When exactly would I have arranged surveillance on your boyfriend? He's not my boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend, then. The point remains. I've been here, in my garage, working on client projects. If Aidan thinks he's being followed, maybe he should consider why he's so paranoid. She stared at me, clearly trying to figure out if I was lying. He also said I should stop calling him. Have you been calling him? Just a few times. to explain what happened at the party, to make sure he understood that it didn't mean anything. But it did mean something. It meant exactly what it looked like. You chose him over me, publicly, in front of all our friends. That's not what I meant to do. But it's what you did. I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her fidget with her wine glass. Nira, can I ask you something? What? What did you think was going to happen? After the affair, after last Saturday night, after everything, what was your end game? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. Were you planning to leave me? No, maybe. I don't know. Did you and Aidan talk about a future together? Sometimes. But it was just fantasy, not real plans. What kind of fantasy? She looked miserable. He said that we could be happy together, that he could give me the kind of life I deserved. Travel, excitement, freedom from suburban routine. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. I nodded slowly. Nira, I need you to understand something. Aidan doesn't love you. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because men who love women don't brag about them to bartenders. They don't call them sure things or talk about how they're going to trade up from their boring husbands. Her face went white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the conversation Aidan had on his phone yesterday, where he described you as a financial opportunity and me as a pushover who wouldn't fight a divorce. You're lying. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording Benji had made. Aidan's voice filled the kitchen, casual and dismissive as he talked about Nira like she was a business transaction. When it finished, Nira was crying. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I know that's hard to hear. You recorded him? My friend did, accidentally while he was conducting surveillance. So you were having him followed? Yes. Why? Because I wanted to know who I was really dealing with. And now I do. I sat down across from her. Nira, Aidan isn't the man you thought he was. He's a con artist who saw an unhappy wife and decided to exploit the situation. That's not true. It is true. He's done this before, with other married women. It's a pattern. I showed her the file Benji had compiled, watching her face as she read about Aidan's divorce, his debts, his history of affairs. This doesn't mean he doesn't care about me, she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. Doesn't it? Nira, look at the timeline. He started pursuing you right after his divorce was finalized, when he needed money. He's been pushing you toward leaving me, promising you a better life that he can't afford to provide. And the moment he thinks there might be consequences for his actions, he cuts you off. She stared at the papers, tears dripping onto the financial records that showed exactly how desperate Aidan really was. I've been so stupid, she whispered. You've been manipulated by someone who's very good at manipulation. What happens now? I considered the question. That depends on what you want to happen. I want to fix this. I want to fix us. I don't think that's possible, Nira. Because you can't forgive me? Because I don't think you understand what you've done. Even now, even after seeing proof of what Aidan really is, part of you still wants to defend him. Part of you is still more concerned about his feelings than mine. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, realizing I was right. I need time, I said, and space. I think you should stay somewhere else for a while. For how long? I don't know. Until I can figure out whether there's anything left of our marriage worth saving. She nodded, still crying. What about Aidan? What about him? Are you going to do something to him? I smiled, and she flinched at whatever she saw in my expression. Nira, I don't need to do anything to Aidan. He's already done it to himself. I'm just going to make sure he understands the full consequences of his choices. What does that mean? It means that actions have consequences, and Aidan Fox is about to learn that lesson in a very personal way. Nira packed a bag that night and went to stay with Maya, leaving me alone in our house for the first time in 8 years. The silence was both liberating and unsettling, like the calm before a storm that I was orchestrating myself. I spent Friday morning making phone calls and setting pieces in motion. The first call was to Janet Morrison, a client whose company had recently contracted with Pinnacle Advertising for a major campaign. "Colby," Janet said when I reached her. "Good to hear from you. How's the security upgrade coming along?" "On schedule," I assured her. "But I'm calling about something else. Have you been happy with Pinnacle's work on your campaign?" "Mostly, yes. Why do you ask?" "I've heard some concerning rumors about employee conduct over there. Nothing specific, but enough to make me think you might want to keep an eye on things." "What kind of conduct issues?" "Inappropriate relationships between colleagues, potential harassment situations, the kind of thing that could create liability issues for clients if it becomes public." Janet was quiet for a moment. "Are you talking about anyone specific?" "I'd rather not say. But if I were you, I'd ask some pointed questions about workplace professionalism during your next meeting." "I'll do that. Thanks for the heads up." The second call was to Tom Bradley, Pinnacle's biggest competitor. Tom and I had worked together on several projects, and I knew he'd be very interested in any opportunity to poach clients from his rival. "Tom, I've got some information that might be useful to you," I said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "I'm listening." "Pinnacle's got some internal drama brewing. Affairs between employees, financial improprieties, the works. Might be a good time to reach out to their clients with some alternative proposals." "Any details you can share?" "Let's just say that one of their senior account executives has been using company resources to conduct personal relationships, and it's creating a hostile work environment." "Interesting. I'll make some calls." The third call was the most important. Dr. Patricia Webb ran a consulting firm that specialized in workplace harassment investigations. I'd done security work for her in the past, and she owed me a favor. "Patricia, I need some advice about a hypothetical situation," I began. "Hypothetical?" she repeated with amusement. "Of course. What's the scenario?" "Male employee at a small advertising firm has a pattern of inappropriate relationships with female colleagues, multiple affairs, harassment complaints, the works, but HR keeps covering for him because he brings in revenue." Sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen. That's what I thought. If someone were to file a formal complaint, what would that look like? Depends on the specifics. But if there's documented evidence of a pattern of behavior, and if the company has failed to address it properly, you could be looking at hostile work environment claims, harassment charges, maybe even discrimination if the behavior affected promotions or assignments. And if this hypothetical employee was having an affair with a married colleague, that would complicate things, especially if company resources were being used to facilitate the relationship. Hotel bookings on company cards, personal travel disguised as business trips, that sort of thing. I smiled. Hypothetically, of course. Of course. "Colby, if this situation becomes less hypothetical, I'd be happy to help. These kinds of patterns need to be addressed." "I'll keep that in mind." My final call was to Benji. "How's our friend doing?" "Paranoid as hell. He's been checking over his shoulder constantly, varying his routes to work, even switched restaurants for lunch. Want me to keep the pressure on?" "Not yet. Let him stew for the weekend. Monday, we escalate." "What's Monday?" "Monday is when Aidan's world starts falling apart." I spent the weekend researching, planning, and preparing. By Sunday night, I had everything I needed to begin the systematic destruction of Aidan Fox's carefully constructed life. Monday morning, I drove to Pinnacle Advertising's office building and waited in the parking garage. At exactly 8:47 a.m., Aidan's Jaguar pulled into his reserved spot. I watched him get out, looking around nervously before heading to the elevator. I waited 5 minutes, then approached his car. The security in the garage was minimal, just a few cameras that I'd already identified and could easily avoid. I slipped a small GPS tracker under his rear bumper, then placed an envelope under his windshield wiper. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Aidan and Nira entering a hotel together 3 weeks ago. Timestamp clearly visible. No note, no explanation, just the image. Then I left and went to work on Phase 2. Janet Morrison called Pinnacle at 10:30 a.m., requesting an immediate meeting about concerns regarding employee conduct. I knew this because I was monitoring Pinnacle's phone system, a simple matter of exploiting a vulnerability in their outdated security setup. At 11:15, Tom Bradley called 3 of Pinnacle's biggest clients, offering competitive proposals and mentioning instability in the marketplace. At 12 orcs, an anonymous email was sent to Pinnacle's HR department containing a detailed complaint about Aidan Fox's inappropriate conduct with female employees. The email included dates, locations, and specific incidents, all of which could be verified through company records. At 12:30, Aidan found the photograph on his windshield. I was having lunch at a restaurant across the street from Pinnacle's building when Aidan came running out, clutching the envelope. He looked around frantically, then pulled out his phone and made a call. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. "What do you want?" Aidan's voice was tight with panic. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong number. Don't play games with me. I know this is you." "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. Is everything all right? You sound upset." "The photograph, the complaints, all of it. What do you want?" "Aidan, I think you might be having some kind of breakdown. Have you considered talking to a professional?" "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I will destroy you if you don't stop this." "Destroy me how?" "I'll tell everyone that you're a psychopath who can't handle his wife leaving him. I'll make sure you never work in this town again." "That's an interesting threat, but I have to ask, how exactly would you do that? Because from what I understand, you're having some employment difficulties of your own right now." The silence stretched long enough that I thought he might have hung up. "How do you know about that?" he asked finally. "Know about what?" "The HR meeting, the client complaints." "I don't know anything about HR meetings or client complaints, should I?" "You're doing this. Somehow you're orchestrating all of this." "Aidan, I think you're giving me far too much credit. I'm just a guy who installs security systems. I don't have the power to orchestrate anything." "Then how what? How are your chickens coming home to roost? How are your past mistakes catching up with you? Maybe that's just the natural consequence of treating people badly." "This isn't over." "No," I agreed. "It's really not." He hung up, and I finished my lunch while watching him pace back and forth in front of his building, clearly trying to decide what to do next. At 3 p.m., Aidan was called into an emergency meeting with HR and Pinnacle's senior partners. Through my monitoring of their phone system, I heard enough to know that the anonymous complaint had triggered a formal investigation. At 4:30, Janet Morrison canceled her contract with Pinnacle, citing concerns about company culture and employee conduct. At 5:15, Tom Bradley successfully poached another client with promises of professional stability and ethical business practices. By 6 p.m., Aidan Fox was suspended pending investigation, and Pinnacle Advertising was in full crisis mode. I drove home feeling satisfied with the day's work. Phase 1 was complete. Aidan's professional life was in ruins. Phase 2 would target his personal life, and Phase 3 would be the final public humiliation that would ensure he never forgot the consequences of his actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Nira. "Maya says there are rumors at the office about Aidan. Do you know anything about this?" I typed back. "I told you actions have consequences. This is what consequences look like." "Did you do this?" "I didn't have an affair with your husband. I didn't lie to my spouse for 6 months. I didn't brag about my conquest to bartenders or treat people like financial opportunities. Aidan did all of that himself." "That's not what I meant." "I know exactly what you meant. And the answer is that I simply made sure the right people knew the truth about who Aidan Fox really is." She didn't respond, which was probably for the best, because tomorrow was going to be even worse for Aidan, and I didn't want her to accidentally warn him about what was coming next. I poured myself a whiskey and sat on my back deck, looking out over the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the last light of the sunset, and I felt more at peace than I had in months. Somewhere across town, Aidan Fox was probably panicking, trying to figure out how his carefully constructed world had collapsed so quickly. He was probably calling lawyers, making threats, promising revenge against the husband he'd so badly underestimated. Let him panic. Let him threaten, because he hadn't seen anything yet. The game was just beginning, and I was finally playing by my own rules. Tuesday morning brought news that exceeded even my expectations. Benji called at 7 a.m. with an update that made me smile into my coffee. "Your boy Aidan had quite a night," he said. 3 different women showed up at his apartment building between 8 p.m. and midnight. Apparently, word's getting around about his situation. What kind of word? The kind that suggests he might not be the financial catch he's been pretending to be. One of them was screaming in the lobby about money he owes her. Another one threw a suitcase at his door. And the third? That was his ex-wife. She looked pleased about something. I wasn't surprised. When a man like Aidan started showing weakness, the people he'd manipulated tended to turn on him quickly. Any word from Pinnacle? Their investigation's moving fast. Turns out, once HR started digging, they found a lot more than just inappropriate relationships. Aidan's been using company credit cards for personal expenses, falsifying expense reports. The works. Financial fraud? Looks like it. And get this, one of the female employees he's been harassing filed a formal complaint yesterday afternoon. She's got documentation going back months. Perfect. I'd given people permission to speak up about Aidan's behavior, and they were taking advantage of it. "What's next?" Benji asked. "Next, we make sure Aidan understands that his problems are just beginning." I spent the morning preparing for the final phase of my plan. Everything had to be timed perfectly, coordinated to maximum effect, with no room for error. At 10 a.m., I called Dr. Patricia Webb. "Patricia, remember that hypothetical situation we discussed? It's become less hypothetical." "I was wondering when you'd call back. What do you need?" "I need you to reach out to someone who might be interested in filing a harassment complaint. Her name is Jessica Chen. She works at Pinnacle Advertising, and she's been dealing with a hostile work environment for months." "I can do that. Anything else?" "Yes. I need you to contact the State Labor Board about potential violations at Pinnacle, specifically a pattern of harassment that management has failed to address." That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. And Patricia, there might be federal implications too, depending on what the investigation turns up. At noon, I drove to Aidan's apartment building. He wasn't home, probably meeting with lawyers or trying to salvage what was left of his career. But that wasn't why I was there. I was there to see his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman who'd been complaining to building management about noise from Aidan's apartment for months. "Oh, yes," she said when I introduced myself as someone investigating tenant complaints. "That man is terrible. Loud parties, strange women coming and going at all hours, shouting matches in the hallway. Have you documented any of this?" "I have a whole folder, dates, times, everything. The building management won't do anything because he pays his rent on time, but barely." "Barely?" "He's always asking for extensions, claiming his check is delayed. And the smell." "Smell?" "Marijuana. Constantly. I have asthma, and the smoke comes through the vents." I thanked Mrs. Rodriguez and made a note to pass her information along to building management. Another pressure point to exploit. At 2 p.m., I received a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Varon, this is Detective Lisa Park with the Millbrook Police. I understand you might have information relevant to an ongoing investigation." My pulse quickened. "What kind of investigation?" "Financial fraud. We've received a complaint about falsified documents and misuse of company funds. Your name came up in connection with surveillance activities." "I see. Am I in trouble?" "Not at all. We understand you hired a private investigator to look into some personal matters, and that investigation may have uncovered evidence of criminal activity. That's correct. We'd like to speak with you and your investigator about what you found. Would this afternoon be convenient? Absolutely. I called Benji immediately. Pack up everything you have on Aidan. The police want to talk to us. Police? Financial fraud investigation. Apparently Pinnacle decided to press charges. Holy crap. This is really happening. It's really happening. And Benji? Make sure you emphasize that everything you found was obtained legally during routine surveillance. Of course, I'm not an amateur. The police interview went smoothly. Detective Park was thorough but friendly, clearly more interested in building a case against Aidan than questioning our methods. Benji's documentation was impeccable, and everything we'd observed was admissible. This is very helpful, Detective Park said as we finished. Mr. Fox's financial situation is even worse than we thought. He owes money to a lot of people, and he's been using increasingly desperate measures to maintain his lifestyle. What happens next? I asked. We'll be executing a search warrant on his apartment and office tomorrow morning. Based on what you've given us, plus the company's internal investigation, we have enough for fraud charges. And the harassment allegations? That's a separate matter, but yes, we're looking into those as well. It seems Mr. Fox has made quite a few enemies. I drove home, feeling like pieces of a complex puzzle were finally falling into place. Aidan's world was collapsing from multiple directions: professional, financial, legal, and personal. Soon, he'd have nowhere left to run. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Nira's name appeared on the screen. Colby, I need to talk to you. About what? About Aidan. About everything. Can I come home? This isn't your home anymore, Nira. You made that choice when you decided to bring your lover here. Please, I know I messed up, but I need to explain. Explain what? He called me today. He's in trouble, and he thinks you're responsible. Am I? I don't know. Are you? I considered how to answer. Nira, I told you that actions have consequences. Aidan spent months lying, cheating, stealing, and manipulating people. Now those people are holding him accountable. If that's my fault, then I'm proud to take credit for it. The police came to Pinnacle today. They took his computer, his files, everything. Good. Colby, he's talking about hurting himself. He says his life is over. His life isn't over. His ability to hurt other people without consequences is over. There's a difference. What if he does something desperate? Then he'll face the consequences for that too. I paused, considering. Nira, why are you calling me about this? Why do you care what happens to Aidan? Because I feel responsible. You are responsible. You enabled his behavior, made excuses for him, helped him lie to me for months. You're absolutely responsible. So what am I supposed to do now? You're supposed to learn from this. You're supposed to understand that the choices you make affect other people. You're supposed to grow up. And us? Is there any chance for us? I looked at our house, at the life we'd built together, at the future I'd thought we were going to have. I don't know, Nira. Right now I can't even look at you without remembering what you did. Maybe that will change someday, but I doubt it. So that's it? 8 years and you're just throwing it all away? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. She was crying now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. Just a cold satisfaction that finally, everyone was facing the truth. Goodbye, Nira. I hung up and walked into my house, not ours anymore, and poured myself a drink. Tomorrow, the police would arrest Aidan Fox, and his carefully constructed life would officially end. The day after that, the harassment investigation would become public, and his reputation would be destroyed forever. But tonight, I was going to sit on my deck, watch the sunset over the lake, and enjoy the peace that comes from knowing that justice, however delayed, was finally being served. My phone buzzed with one final text from Aidan. This isn't over. I'll make you pay for what you've done. I typed back, "Game over, Aidan. You lost." Then I blocked his number and settled in to watch the sun disappear behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that reminded me of fire. The game was indeed over, and for the first time in months, I had won. The next morning, I woke to the sound of sirens in the distance and the satisfaction of knowing that Aidan Fox was about to learn the final lesson in consequences. Detective Park had promised to call when the arrest was made, but I didn't need confirmation to know it was happening. I made coffee, checked my emails, and began planning what came next. Because while the game with Aidan was over, my life was just beginning again. For the first time in 8 years, I was free to be exactly who I wanted to be, without compromise, without lies, without the burden of trusting people who didn't deserve it. It felt like coming home.